The abandoned station. The silence in Sector 47 was absolute. Marcus Webb's boots echoed against the metal grating as he walked through the empty corridors of the derelict station. His breath formed small clouds in the cold air, and his portable scanner beeped softly as it searched for anything of historical value. Marcus was not like other humans. While most people his age were building careers in trade or military service, he spent his time digging through forgotten places. He was an archaeologist, someone who studied old civilizations and lost cultures. Most people thought his work was useless, but Marcus believed that understanding the past could help build a better future. The station had been abandoned for over 50 years. Once, it had been a busy trading post where different alien species came to buy and sell goods. Now it was just a hollow shell floating in space, slowly falling apart. The emergency lighting cast long shadows on the walls, making everything look ghostly and strange. Marcus checked his scanner again. There were definitely some energy signatures deeper in the station. Maybe he would find some ancient artifacts or forgotten technology. He adjusted his backpack and continued walking toward the lower levels. The air grew thicker as he descended. Old ventilation systems wheezed and coughed, barely keeping the atmosphere breathable. Water dripped from broken pipes, creating puddles that reflected the dim emergency lights. Marcus had to step carefully to avoid slipping on the wet metal floors. As he reached the detention level, his scanner went wild. The beeping became rapid and urgent. There was definitely something alive down here. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. He was alone on this station, light years from the nearest human settlement. Whatever was down here, he would have to face it by himself. He turned a corner and stopped dead in his tracks. In the largest holding cell, behind thick metal bars, sat the most massive humanoid creature he had ever seen. She was easily 3 meters tall, with broad shoulders and powerful limbs. Her skin was deep blue, like the color of Earth's oceans, and covered with intricate silver markings that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Her white hair hung in thick braids down her back, and her eyes were the color of pale ice. She sat, perfectly still, as if she had been carved from stone. Around her neck was a heavy collar with strange symbols. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and Marcus could see old scars and fresh wounds on her arms and legs. Most humans would have run away immediately. This creature looked like she could tear a person in half without even trying, but Marcus was not most humans. He had spent years studying different alien cultures, and he had learned to look beyond appearances. What he saw in those pale eyes was not violence or anger. He saw pain, loneliness, and something that looked like despair. The creature had not moved when he approached. She did not even seem to notice him standing there. Her breathing was slow and shallow, like someone who had given up on life. The holding cell was barely large enough for her massive frame, and she had to keep her knees pulled up to fit inside. Marcus studied the symbols on her collar and the markings on her skin. They looked familiar, like something he had seen in his research. The patterns were too precise to be random decorations. They meant something important, but he could not remember what. He cleared his throat softly. The creature's eyes flicked toward him for just a moment, then looked away again. She did not speak or make any threatening movements. She just sat there, waiting for something, or maybe waiting for nothing at all. Marcus noticed that there was no lock on the cell door. It was simply closed, but not secured. Someone had put her in there and left her to die slowly. The thought made anger rise in his chest. Whatever this creature had done, leaving her to waste away alone, was cruel and unnecessary. He reached out and pulled the cell door open. The metal hinges squeaked loudly in the silence. The creature looked at him again, this time with surprise, in her pale eyes. She tilted her head slightly, like she could not understand why he was not running away. Marcus stepped into the cell slowly, keeping his hands visible and moving carefully. He could feel the creature's eyes tracking his every movement. Up close, he could see that she was starving. Her cheeks were hollow, and her ribs showed through her torn clothing. How long had she been trapped here without food or water? He reached into his backpack and pulled out an emergency ration pack and a bottle of water. The creature watched him with growing confusion as he set them down within her reach. Marcus backed away slowly, giving her space to decide what to do. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, very slowly, the creature reached for the water bottle. Her massive hands were surprisingly gentle as she unscrewed the cap and took a small sip. She closed her eyes as if the clean water was the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted. Marcus sat down, cross-legged outside the cell, far enough away to seem non-threatening, but close enough to talk. He waited patiently while she drank and ate small bites of the ration bar. Finally, she looked at him directly. Her voice was deep and rough from lack of use, but surprisingly soft. She spoke in broken galactic standard, the common language used for trade between different species. "Why?" she asked simply. Marcus thought about his answer carefully. "Because everyone deserves kindness," he said, "and because you look like someone who has been forgotten by the universe." Something flickered in her pale eyes. Not hope, not yet, but maybe the distant memory of what hope used to feel like. Suddenly, the station shuddered around them. Emergency. Alarms began to wail and red warning lights flashed throughout the corridors. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized what was happening. The station's orbit was decaying. It was falling toward the nearby planet, and they had maybe an hour before it burned up in the atmosphere. The creature stood up slowly, her massive frame filling the cell completely. She looked down at Marcus with those strange, pale eyes. And, for the first time, she seemed truly alive. "We must go," she said in her deep, careful voice. "Now." The healing Marcus's small research ship, the Wanderer, felt impossibly tiny with Zara 9 aboard. She had to duck through every doorway and could barely fit in the main cabin. Her massive frame took up most of the available space, but she moved, with surprising grace, careful not to break anything in the cramped quarters. The escape from the station had been terrifying. Marcus had never piloted a ship with such a large passenger before, and the Wanderer had struggled to break free of the station's gravity well before it plunged into the planet's atmosphere. They had watched through the viewport as the ancient structure burned up like a falling star, taking with it whatever secrets it might have held. Now, safely in hyperspace, Marcus could finally tend to Zara 9's injuries. She sat on the floor of the main cabin because she was too large for any of the furniture. Her pale blue skin was marked with cuts and bruises, some fresh, others clearly weeks old. The worst wounds were around her wrists and ankles, where heavy restraints had rubbed her skin raw. Marcus knelt beside her with his medical kit, feeling very small next to her massive form. Up close, he could see the intricate silver markings that covered her arms and shoulders. They were not tattoos, but seemed to be part of her natural skin pattern, like the stripes of a tiger or the spots of a leopard. "This might hurt a little," Marcus said as he cleaned one of the deeper cuts on her arm. Zara 9 did not flinch, or make any sound, even when he applied the antiseptic solution. She simply watched him work with those strange, pale eyes, as if she could not quite believe what was happening. "What are you called?" Marcus asked as he wrapped a bandage around her wrist. Zara 9 was quiet for a long moment. "I am designation Zara 9, she said finally. "9th iteration of the Zara genetic template. Production model for heavy labor and combat applications." Marcus paused in his bandaging. She spoke about herself like she was a machine or a tool, not a living being. "That's not a name," he said gently. "That's a serial number. What do you call yourself when no one else is listening?" She tilted her massive head, confused by the question. "I do not understand." Marcus finished wrapping her wrist and sat back on his heels. "A name is something personal. Something that belongs to you and no one else, like Marcus. That's my name. My parents gave it to me when I was born because they thought it suited me. I was not born, Zara 9 said matter-of-factly. I was grown in a biotank and trained for specific functions. The Veltar do not give names to production units. The way she said it so casually broke Marcus's heart. He had studied many alien cultures, but the idea of growing people like crops and treating them as disposable tools was something he had only read about in the darkest historical texts. "The Veltar are your people?" Marcus asked. Zara 9 nodded slowly. "They created my genetic line for war. We were designed to be the perfect soldiers, strong, fast, obedient, and disposable. But something went wrong with my batch." She looked down at her massive hands. "I grew too large, larger than the specifications allowed." Marcus continued, working on her injuries as she spoke. Each wound told a story of neglect and mistreatment. Some were clearly from weapons or tools, others from simply being forced to work in spaces too small for her frame. "When I exceeded acceptable size parameters, they declared me defective," she continued. "Defective units are normally recycled, but the war ended before they could process me. Instead, they sold me to various employers for heavy labor jobs. And eventually you ended up on that station," Marcus said. "The last employer said I ate too much food and took up too much space. The profit margins were insufficient." Her voice remained flat and emotionless, but Marcus could see pain flickering in her pale eyes. "He sold me to the station administrator as a curiosity, something to display in the detention level for visitors to gawk at." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest again. The casual cruelty of it all was staggering. This magnificent being, clearly intelligent and capable of so much more than labor, had been treated as nothing more than an object her entire life. "How long were you on that station?" he asked. "Approximately 18 standard months," she replied. "The administrator stopped providing regular food after the first year. I think he forgot I was there." 18 months. Marcus tried to imagine being trapped in that tiny cell for a year and a half, slowly starving, with no one to talk to and nothing to do but wait for death. The fact that she was still sane was remarkable. He moved to treat a particularly nasty cut on her shoulder, near one of the larger silver markings. As he cleaned the wound, he got a better look at the intricate patterns that covered her skin. They were beautiful, like living artwork, but there was something familiar about them. "These markings," Marcus said, tracing one of the silver lines with his finger. "They're not random, are they?" Zara 9 looked down at her shoulder. "They appeared as I matured. The technicians said they were probably genetic artifacts from the base template. Useless decoration that served no function." Marcus frowned. The patterns looked ceremonial, maybe even royal. He had seen similar designs in his research on ancient warrior cultures. But if Zara 9 had been grown in a lab, how could she have inherited ceremonial markings? "Tell me about the base template," Marcus said. "The original Zara that your genetic line was copied from." "I know very little," she admitted. "Only that she was a great warrior from the old times, before the Veltar became a spacefaring civilization. Her genetic material was preserved and used to create soldiers like me." Marcus nodded, filing that information away for later research. Right now, his priority was making sure Zara 9 was healthy and safe. As he finished treating her wounds, Marcus realized that she had relaxed considerably during their conversation. Her massive shoulders were no longer hunched defensively, and she was making eye contact more frequently. For the first time since he had found her, she looked truly alive. "Marcus," she said suddenly, testing his name like she was learning a new word. "Why did you help me?" "Most beings fear the Veltar genetic soldiers. We were designed to be frightening." Marcus packed up his medical supplies and sat cross-legged in front of her. "Because you're not a weapon or a tool," he said simply. "You're a person, and every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. She stared at him for a long moment, those pale eyes searching his face as if looking for deception or hidden motives. "I do not understand you," she said finally. "You are small and soft. I could hurt you without trying. Yet you show me kindness." "Strength isn't just about size or fighting ability," Marcus said. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose compassion over fear." For the first time since he had met her, Zara 9 smiled. It was a small, hesitant expression, but it transformed her entire face. She no longer looked like a weapon or a monster. She looked like someone who was remembering what it felt like to be human. "I think," she said slowly, "I would like to choose a name for myself." Marcus smiled back. "I think that's a wonderful idea." Outside the ship's viewport, the stars streamed by in brilliant lines of light as the Wanderer carried them toward an uncertain but hopeful future. For the first time in either of their lives, neither Marcus nor Zara 9 felt alone. Part 3. The Revelation. 3 days had passed since they left the dying station behind. Marcus spent most of his time in the ship's small research lab, poring over his databases and comparing images of Zara 9's markings with ancient texts and archaeological records. The patterns were definitely not random, and the more he studied them, the more convinced he became that they held incredible significance. Zara 9 had chosen to call herself simply Zara now. She said the number felt like a chain she no longer wanted to carry. She moved around the ship more freely, though she still had to be careful not to bump her head or knock things over. Marcus had shown her how to use the food synthesizer and the entertainment system, and she was learning about the galaxy beyond her experiences as a laborer. "Marcus," Zara called from the main cabin, "there is a transmission coming through on the emergency frequencies." Marcus hurried from his lab to the communication console. The message was weak and full of static, but he could make out enough words to understand its meaning. His face went pale as he listened. "What is it?" Zara asked, seeing his expression. Marcus replayed the message, cleaning up the audio as much as possible. A desperate voice spoke in the Veltar language, which the ship's computer translated into Galactic Standard. "This is Fleet Commander Thekvar of the Veltar Defense Force. Our homeworld is under attack by the Krex Empire. Our forces are scattered, and our cities are burning. We call upon all Veltar warriors, wherever you may be, to return and defend your people. This may be our final transmission." The message repeated several times before cutting to static. Zara stared at the console with wide eyes, her massive hands clenched into fists. "Your people are in danger," Marcus said softly. Zara's expression was conflicted. Pain, anger, and something that might have been longing warred across her features. "They are not my people," she said finally. "They cast me out. They called me defective and sold me like a broken tool." Marcus understood her feelings, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. Despite everything they had done to her, the Veltar were still her species, her genetic heritage. The thought of them being destroyed clearly caused her pain. "Zara," Marcus said carefully, "I think I found something you need to see." He led her to his research lab and activated the holographic display. Images of ancient Veltar artifacts and texts filled the air around them. Marcus highlighted specific symbols and patterns, comparing them to high-resolution scans he had taken of Zara's markings. "These patterns on your skin," Marcus said, pointing to the silver lines that curved across her shoulders and arms. "They're not genetic artifacts or useless decoration. They're ceremonial markings, royal bloodline indicators." Zara stared at the comparison images. The match was perfect, down to the smallest detail. "I do not understand." Marcus pulled up more historical records. "The original Zara, the one your genetic template was copied from, wasn't just a great warrior. She was Zara the Unconquered, the last warrior queen of the Veltar. She ruled over 300 years ago, before the planet was unified under the current government." The holographic display showed an ancient stone carving of a massive female figure standing victorious over fallen enemies. The figure bore the same silver markings as modern Zara, and her face, though stylized, showed clear similarities. According to the historical records, Zara the Unconquered was never defeated in battle. She was said to be blessed by the old gods with strength beyond measure and wisdom beyond her years. When she died, her body was preserved in the royal crypts, and her genetic material was stored as a sacred relic. Zara reached out with one massive hand to touch the holographic image of her ancient namesake. Her fingers passed through the light, but her expression was filled with wonder and disbelief. "You're not a mass-produced soldier," Marcus continued. "You're a clone of royalty. That's why you grew larger than the specifications. That's why you're so much stronger and more intelligent than they expected. You carry the genes of a queen." Implications hit them both at the same time. The Veltar military had unknowingly created their rightful ruler and then thrown her away because she didn't fit their narrow parameters. They had treated their own lost princess as defective merchandise. "The markings," Zara whispered, staring at her own arms. "They appeared as I grew because they are part of who I am." Marcus nodded. "Your body was trying to express its true heritage. The technicians who created you probably had no idea what they were really making." Zara was quiet for a long time, processing this revelation. Finally, she looked at Marcus with those pale eyes that now seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "If this is true," she said slowly, "then I am the heir to a throne that no longer exists, ruler of a people who rejected me." "Maybe," Marcus said. "Or maybe you're exactly what they need right now." Another emergency transmission crackled through the ship's communication system. This one was even more desperate than the first. The Krex forces were overwhelming the Veltar defenses. Entire cities had fallen, and the remaining military forces were in full retreat. Zara stood up to her full height, her massive frame filling the small lab. The silver markings on her skin seemed to glow brighter in the ship's lighting, as if they were responding to her emotional state. "They would not accept help from me," she said. "I am still just a defective clone to them." Marcus looked at her with admiration and determination. "Then we'll have to prove them wrong." He began plotting a course for the Veltar homeworld. It would take them 2 days to reach the outer system, assuming the Krex hadn't established a blockade. "Marcus," Zara said, her voice carrying a new note of authority that hadn't been there before. "You do not have to do this. This is not your fight." Marcus smiled as he finished inputting the navigation coordinates. "You're wrong about that. Someone I care about is going to face an impossible situation and try to save people who don't deserve her sacrifice. That makes it my fight, too." For the second time since he had known her, Zara smiled. But this smile was different from the hesitant expression she had worn before. This smile carried confidence, determination, and something that looked very much like hope. "Very well," she said, and Marcus could hear echoes of ancient authority in her voice. "Let us go and remind the Veltar what their true queen looks like." As the Wanderer jumped into hyperspace, carrying them toward a war-torn world and an uncertain destiny, both Marcus and Zara felt the weight of history settling around them. They were no longer just a lonely archaeologist and a discarded clone. They were about to become the unlikely heroes in a story that would reshape the galaxy. The forgotten princess was coming home, and she was not coming alone. Conclusion. In this epic tale of discovery and redemption, Marcus Webb's compassion and archaeological expertise unveiled a truth that changed everything. What began as a simple rescue mission evolved into the revelation that Zara was not a defective soldier, but the genetic heir to an ancient throne. Her flaws were actually the marks of royalty, and her exceptional size and strength were gifts from a legendary bloodline. The story demonstrates that true worth is often hidden beneath surface appearances, and that sometimes the most unlikely Heroes emerge from the most desperate circumstances. Marcus's willingness to see beyond fear and prejudice not only saved Zara's life, but uncovered a destiny that could save an entire civilization. Their journey together proves that strength comes, not just from physical power, but from the courage to show kindness to those who have been forgotten by the world. In choosing to help each other, they discovered that even the most broken spirits can be healed, and even the most hopeless situations can be transformed by the power of human compassion and determination. The galaxy would never be the same, because one human chose to see beauty where others saw only a burden, and one forgotten soul remembered what it meant to hope again.